thumbs up from Mary. Yo, yo. All right, y'all. Hey, what a fun night tonight. What a good variety of speakers and just a lot of good content too. So, Linda, I give you total permission while I'm speaking. If you want to interrupt and ask for clarity or something else, feel free to do that, because I'm more used to the interactive type of conversation than just a bam, here's a little spot for you. So, but a couple of things I thought we would talk about tonight is we talk about this ribbons of courage and overcoming and stepping into your success, is going back in time a little bit in my life, because I was that like goofy young kid that knocked on your door selling magazines as a kid, right? And this just fun, innocent young little boy that would walk up and knock on the door, and at some point, the family would say, okay, what are you selling this time, Rob? And I would just say, oh, here it is, and they would just write the check. It was just kind of, I had earned their trust along the way. And I think of this concept of like success, and we're talking about faith a lot in this, in our Christian walk and stepping into that. But I know there's also a lot of entrepreneurs on this as well, and people that are writing books and people that have programs and people that are starting businesses. And it was just fun to hear the variety that people are doing. And, I'm in the process of writing, just so you know, Linda, too, writing my book right now called The Art of Intervention, all about how do you help families move forward and understand the intervention process to help a loved one struggling with addiction. And Johnny talked about a loved one with addiction, right? And so this is something that touches everybody. But as a kid, I was just the innocent kid growing up in a Christian home that was just, enjoying life to the fullest. And that was a real important part to me, is just being a kid. And Mary told, and again, there you go. I mean, Mary has a story of addiction and recovery, right? And it touches so many people along the way. But the innocence of a child was just going around selling magazines, right? And being that entrepreneur. And I moved into high school, and I started drinking at age 14. Just so you know, I drank from 14 to 29, but I was, I still had a fun life and had good times up until the end. But, 14 years old, here I am, this kid that this entrepreneurial passion of, I want to mow yards in Texas. And my buddy Mike Witherite and I, we joined forces, and we started mowing yards together. And from what we were doing to 10 to 12 individually, we did like over 40 yards a piece. And so here's this great business model of mowing yards, doing what you love, getting a tan. But the problem was we drank all of our money away almost every night. We went out to the bars and we just blew money, and no future vision of like, where do I want to go in my life? When you deal with addictions and things, I say, and you hear other people say that when you put addiction or substances in a room and potential, addiction beats potential every single time. And that was just the story of my life. I mean, high school was that. I went from high school to college and had this big lawn business, and I didn't have the mindset, which is now that I have a 14-year-old kid, I want to teach him these things and say, hey, for success, one, you got to have Jesus Christ in the middle of your life. For me in my addiction, Jesus was like, he was here, but I put him on a bookshelf because I didn't want to follow. I was having too much fun being selfish, self-centered, self-seeking, and just in the moment, right? And in the moment doesn't get you very far, except in the moment. But I go to college and I don't even sell the business. We just stop mowing yards. And I go to college to become a doctor, right? And here it is that I'm going to college to become a doctor because I wanted to be just like my papa, who was just an amazing guy. Papa never had a drink in his life, but a lot of my other relatives did. So there was this allure of alcohol in my life that just looked fun. So I saw the fun. I didn't see the destruction and damage. But as I went to college, I started seeing it because I became that destruction. I mean, I remember, unfortunately, it's kind of like this art of deception develops, and you think it's a skill, this chameleon lifestyle where you don't know who you are. So you don't have success or vision because you're kind of trying to figure yourself out, but you're manipulating so many things along the way. And I remember this instance in college, freshman year of college, right? Going to college to become a doctor. My parents are spending a lot of money. I just had to get a job and I waited tables and did stuff in college. But here I am, this alcoholic freshman year, living in a fraternity. Alcohol and fraternity, they kind of go hand in hand a lot of times, especially where I went to school, was 92% Greek. So you kind of had to drink. And I did. It was just like everybody else. But I remember this instance, right? And there was this girl that I really liked her. And she was busy that night. So I was in my room drinking tequila, and I decided to go up to the room and knock on the door. And I was just like, she goes, "Hey, I'm tired." And all of a sudden, this one guy's head pops around the corner behind her head and said, "What are you doing, Lohman?" I was like, "Oh, nothing, man. Just forgot where I was or something." And I was so mad. And I went into that stairwell, and when you deal with self-loathing and not liking who you are, it was just this moment of just bam. And I knocked some windows out in the hallway, and I came out the second floor, and all of a sudden the dean calls me in. He's like, "Rob, like, I don't know what you're doing, but you seem kind of reckless." And you see, I was reckless because, again, I put Jesus on the shelf, even though he was in me. I baptized a kid, right, and all the church stuff, but I did not have a lordship relationship with Jesus. I had the savior relationship. I could do anything. And I remember sitting there with the dean, and he goes, "You know, Rob, we had a report that you went in the stairwell from the third floor, and you came out the stairwell on the second floor. And in the middle of that, you broke some glasses out, some windows out, and someone saw you do that." And I said, "Wow, that's pretty fascinating, because unless the guy was Superman, how could he be on the second floor and the third floor at the same time?" And I got away with it. And that was just kind of my life of addiction. It was just, I had dreams and I had potential, but it just got suffocated by addiction. So when we talk about overcoming, as your summit talks about, and having success, well, I overcame, but then I just went back to my old behaviors, right? And that was just the journey. I graduated college in 4 years, somehow in 4 years, right? And never went to medical school. But, see, I still had entrepreneurial passion, right? So I'm come out of medical school, or not, I'm sorry, I did not go into medical school, but I just went out to Vail, Colorado to be a ski bum for a year and a half, not too far from where this picture behind me was taken. And here I am starting to really not like who I was becoming. And that was kind of the journey, but I still started little tiny little businesses along the way. But you see, I didn't have the skill set or the focus to keep those businesses going. It was kind of like, I'm going to paint my kitchen. Oh, now I'm going to go level out the garage. Now I'm going to go do something in the backyard, and no projects ever get finished because it's the squirrel. It's the, oh, what can I do over here? And what can I do over here? And so eventually, long story short, we get to this end of my journey of addiction, and so suicide ideation and self-loathing and just being a complete wreck, $67,000 in credit card debt, just looking at all obstacles for a recipe of disaster. And one night, this was my first real encounter with God along the way, that teaching me that, life is going to be okay. And I call these moments black bear moments. See my little black bear? Oh, my green screen just went green. There's my black bear. Let's bring the green screen back to the picture. Okay. So here's my black bear story, my black bear moment, that I was crying out to God in my heart, just like, "God, I don't want to do this anymore." But the suicide ideation had taken over, and I would consistently see myself dying along the journey. And here I am one night in this bar in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and all of a sudden I hear this voice, and it was so powerful because it was like loud music and girls and everything everywhere. And then all of a sudden the bar got completely dead silent, right? Dead silent. And I audibly hear the words, "You're done." And then the bar got really loud again. Now, in that moment, I knew that something had changed. I knew I'd become like, I was a different person in that moment. Hopped in my car. Well, before that, I said to my buddy Sean, I'm like, "Man, I got to go home. I think I'm finally done drinking." Right? Because I'm starting to dream again. I really want to change my life, but I'm unable to, because the addiction had taken over my life. And I didn't know how to change because I didn't know what to do. But this night was different. I hear this voice, and I get in my car and I drive home, and I'm like a different guy driving home. And then all of a sudden I get to my 1-bedroom apartment, because I'm still drunk as heck, right? I'm still highly drunk, but I'm feeling like I'm sober. And I get into my 1-bedroom apartment, and I walk up 12 stairs to my little loft apartment. And like every bachelor, I have a workout gym in the middle of my living room. And the next thing I knew, I'd put 350 pounds on the barbell, and I unhinged my elbows, and I dropped that barbell right across my chest. That was going to be my out. That was my hopelessness. That was my lack of identity. That was my lack of purpose moment right there. But in that moment of me unhinging my elbows, because I believe this now, that God carries the weight of the world. And God held that barbell, and he looked at my dog, Jake, said, "Go save your dad." And my dog, Jake, comes over, and he starts nudging my knee with his head. And he's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, who's going to feed you tomorrow morning? I don't cuss a lot, but I did back then. And it was just like, what am I doing? Right. And God put that barbell back on the rack, and I can hear that barbell metal hitting the barbell rack. And it was like life changed, right? Life changed in that moment. And I slept in peace that night with God. And my aunt took me to my first recovery meeting. And I'll tell you, man, from a guy that could drink 2 bottles of scotch in a day through sales and marketing, was a new guy that didn't even go through detox. God just took it away. It was gone. It was gone. See, God cares about the small details of our life, like the black bear. I'll tell you more about the black bear here in a little bit. But that was the power of that freedom that I had found in that moment, right? And that just began a cool journey. I mean, we talk about overcoming, and we talk about success. And God started building my heart and tugging on me and say, go, I want you to do bigger and better things. You were created for bigger and better things, Rob. And I believed him. That's why his t-shirt I'm wearing says all in. That's my baptism t-shirt. This is the baptism t-shirt I got when I was baptized after a major event in my life. But you know, I was single, I was loving life, and I was creating little programs. And I was like, what do I want to do? And so recovery tells me I can do anything as long as my spiritual conditioning is right. You know, so I got sober, moved around a couple of times strategically. I became an 8th grade algebra teacher. Woo woo! All my teachers out there, became an 8th grade algebra teacher. Because why? Because recovery tells me I can do anything as long as my spiritual conditioning is right. So I become an 8th grade algebra teacher. And then the coach says, Rob, we want you to coach the girls softball team. I'm like, all right, recovery tells me I can do anything. I'll coach the girls softball team. Never did it. And then it was like, I want to do bigger and better things. So I became a college career counselor. Why? Because I wanted to, and I believed I could do it. And I drove the Midwest in my minivan and went to our lake house in Michigan. I got hired to be a college career counselor. And my passion for Jesus is growing. My recovery is growing. I'm like, oh, I can do bigger and better things. God's called me to do bigger and better things. So what do? I buy an RV because God says, I want you to travel the country and inspire people, right? So I buy an RV on this cover of this first book I ever published right here. I buy the RV and I have interviews set up with people all around the country. Because you see, I was living in my faith. What I learned later was the faith of shallow roots, but I was living in this faith, and it was the faith of everything happens just because it's supposed to. And I wasn't being knucklehead. I wasn't doing stupid things. I was going the direction I thought I should go. You know, in day one of the momentum journey, which is what the book's all about, the RV breaks down 7 times. Right. But I'm like, all right, God, you're in control. What do we do? Right. I'm not going to give up. And I ended up moving out to Colorado, and I kept going, and I kept interviewing people, and I overcame, and I didn't stop. I had a video recorder, and I had people that wanted to share their stories. I captured their stories, and I said, I'm going to publish a book. And that's when I wrote my first book called The Momentum Journey, Breakdown at Exit 63. And going along with that, I have a 20-minute documentary about these people's stories, because I love stories. That's why I'm a podcaster now. I love people's stories. And I did that. And then it was just like, I can do anything. But, you know, along the way, it was amazing. Right. And then God called me in such a cool way to put on this thing called the God Rally Project in Colorado. And it was a free 3-day Christian music festival in the mountains of Colorado. I'd never done it before, but the cool thing was, even though I've never done that before, I knew that it was from God, because it was much bigger than I could ever do. So I started sharing the vision and sharing it with people. And through that, I meet my wife, who works for K-Love Radio, largest Christian radio station in the world. We get married 6 months later, and under 6 months later, because it was just like, it felt right. And her dad was dying of cancer, and it was very sad. And he passed away the month before we got married. But I'm working on this big vision that God had called me towards. I had no idea how to do it. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteers are coming behind it. We're like, we're going to reach Jesus for this, you know. And it was one of the coolest things that I feel like I ever got called to. But in the middle of it, I'm now a father. I'm a husband. I'm a father of a youngborn without a whole lot of income. So my wife's kind of in the background praying, God, take this away. I'm like, God, this is the most exciting thing I've ever done. And, you know, this conflict was happening, right, of my faith. And it was like, I feel like I'm following God, what God's called me to do, but it's causing pain in my life. God, I don't know. God, take this away. And then he dumps a bunch of money on the project. And we have like Big Daddy Weave and John Waller and 70 plus speakers and artists in the middle of Rifle, Colorado, praising Jesus over 3 days. And it was 7 stages, and it was incredible. It was so cool. It happened, and people came to Christ. I'm like, that was amazing, you know. And then human hands got a hold of that, and I got kicked out of the vision, right? Because a pastor got greedy. And I'm like, and I had a conflict with God. I'm like, God, this makes no sense. You call me to do this thing, and then bam, it's gone. Like, what the heck? And it caused it. So I had this strife with God for a little while, and a conflict. And over time, it was pretty amazing because God kept nudging me along the way, and just to give you a long story short, because I want to get to what I'm doing now, is, I became a husband and a father, a business owner and another father. Had my daughter was born, and then I stopped doing recovery. I stopped pursuing God because what I realized then or now was that my faith was really shallow. As Johnny was talking about earlier, it's like I didn't dive into growing my roots. I just was doing life, and then it was just incredible because like life completely fell apart. No substances. I've been sober for 11 years, but I had a gambling problem. And oh my, gambling just completely stinks. When you don't understand it, in the midst of it, it is horrible. Gambling ruined my life. And I didn't know it at the time, but the effects of gambling, the brain, the dopamine, the risk taking, all these things were just happening. Self-loathing was there. I was suicide ideation again in my life, but I'm a father now. But I hated who I was. I hated who my life became because I had no purpose. I was just doing life and surviving, and it was just like, I was like a dry drunk. But I was gambling, so I wasn't dry. It was just, I was jacked up in the brain and all over the place. And I ended up having a mental breakdown in year 2012. I'm not going to get into all that, but that breakdown sent me to prison. 11 years, no substances, right? And God showed up in all that. God showed up. He showed up when I was in prison, and he showed me that the most important thing you can invest in is who you are in Jesus Christ. And so I read and I studied and I read and I studied, and I finally owned my faith. And I want to do big things for God with my faith. But meanwhile, my wife's at home, being a single mother, raising 2 kids. Do I stay with this guy in prison or not? Right? And she had to go through her own journey with God. And thank goodness she decided to stay with me. And we continue to work through that and work through our life together. But through all of that stuff, sometimes you can hear people say, yeah, you're a Christian, but why did God let that happen? It's a big question we ask ourselves a lot of times, right? Is if God really does love me and care, why didn't he stop that? And I had to wrestle with that. But out of that came a guy that is on fire for Jesus. And I love my relationship with Christ. And I want other people to hear that as well. And that's why, God just kept shutting doors, opening doors, shutting doors, opening doors, and then opened the door to become an interventionist and a recovery coach, help people with addictions break free. So now through all of this, I get to help families disrupt their family system to get on a better path and become strong believers. And not everyone people come to me and they say, hey, we know you're a strong Christian, but we're not, but we know you're good at what you do. Can you help us? I'm like, yeah. I was like, I'll leave the Bible and worship songs at home, but Jesus is still coming with me because he lives inside of me. Sometimes I get a chuckle, sometimes I don't, but I get to help families now. And that's why I do 2 podcast shows that I have now. That's why I'm writing a book called The Art of Intervention to help people move forward. But finally, finding a group like Life on Fire and other Christian, Johnny Dobbs and you, Linda, and other people that are like-minded. I mean, I don't know. I just got emotional about that because people like you, people that are on this summit, are so passionate about Jesus that they just want other people to hear it. And I hear that from all your speakers on this deal, on your summit, and those are the people I finally aligned with in my life. Those are the mentors in my life now. Those are the people that are saying, go, go. It doesn't make any sense, so it must be God. Go, go. It's like, we hear all the stories in the Bible of faith, and it's like, Gideon and just everyone. It's like, this makes no sense. Yeah, it's probably from God, and it's just been a beautiful culmination of things in my own life to where I don't have 4 or 5 different things going just to make ends meet. I have 4 or 5 different things going, but they're all aligned with the same purpose of helping people. That's what I do now with Lifted from the Rut, is I help people restore identity restore hope, identity, and purpose. I was interviewing James Malinchak, which a lot of us on here know, on my podcast show, and we were talking about, he's such a funny guy. He goes, Rob, because I'm an acronym guy, and so is he. And I'm interviewing him, and he goes, Rob, your mission statement, restoring hope, identity, and purpose, that's HIP. HIP, man. If your hip is out of socket, you're going to walk around in circles and be in pain. So you're helping people get their hips in socket. And we just laughed so much. But now, through what I do with interventions and from a Christian approach and through lifted coaching and everything I'm doing, it's really phenomenal. Okay. So do you want to hear the black bear story real quick? I think we should hear the black bear story real quick. So why do I have this black bear in my office? And we'll end with this. Okay. God cares about the small details of our life. If you believe that, put amen in the chat. If you believe God cares about the small details in your life, just throw an amen in the chat, because this is hilarious. So we're coming back from running a half marathon in Steamboat Springs. My wife, a friend of ours, was struggling with leukemia. So we joined Team Leukemia, and we ran this half marathon, and we're driving home the next day. And I say to my wife, coming over Rabbit Ears Pass, and I said, hey, babe, would you please pray that I would see a black bear on the way home? He's like, okay, whatever. I've lived here my whole life. Like, I've never just seen a black bear when I asked to see one. And so we're driving down Rabbit Ears Pass. And we're coming into Silverthorne, Colorado, a 2-lane road, and look over to the right. And there's these 2 Ford F-350s sitting on the side of the highway. It was called a highway. And I look over there and I see something. I'm like, no way. Are you kidding me? And I whip a U-turn. I slowed down enough to not wreck, but I just slammed the brakes on it like 55 miles an hour, whip a U-turn. And there's a black bear going across this highway right in front of me. And it was so incredible, because we laughed and we giggled. And it was like, holy cow, I cannot believe God just delivered a black bear to you. And we get up there and its bottom's like disappearing in the brush, and it goes away. And weeks later, my wife gives me this black bear. And on it is the scripture that says, Psalm 37:4, it says, delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. And so for people that are pursuing God and really pursuing him and journaling and just seeking and worshiping and just there, like, if God's put something on your heart, he's going to make it come true. He's going to make it happen. And I've had moose experiences with my son. He's 13 and 12, or he's 14, but when he was he 12 or 13? I took him up to the mountains, and we went through this passport to purity and talked to him about girls and body parts and all this stuff. We're hanging out and going through this weekend. And I said to him, when we got in the car, I said, hey, bud, I'm really hoping that God shows us a moose today. And guess what we saw later on? We saw a black moose that went right in front of my car. And so I just want to encourage people out there, if you're struggling and it's just like, I don't think I can do this, align yourself with other people. That's like when I see Johnny and I'm like, I love Johnny. I think he's great. And I interact with the stuff he does, and it's really fun. And now through this, I really gotten to know you, Linda, and other people. And it's through that and other things that we get to do in these communities. Right. And so by aligning myself finally with people that are Christ-minded, almost entrepreneurs. Okay. Christians are great, but a Christian entrepreneur is even better, because they understand the drive and the passion of being an entrepreneur and doing things for God. And we think bigger, we dream bigger, at least in my opinion. And it's like crazy ideas are like, man, let's explore that. That seems awesome. Like my friend Nick Gunsworth always says, build the plane in the air. I'm building planes in the air. There are parts falling all over the country, and I hope it's not hurting anybody. I don't know what, but I'm just building the planes in the air, sharing stories, being an advocate, being out there, enjoying what you're doing, and just want to be an encouragement to other people. And I get to be that for my kids. They get to see me. Like I don't know, how many more minutes do we have, Linda? Do we have a minute or two left, or are we at the end?
Oh no, you got a little bit of time.
Okay.
It's just a little over 8 o'clock. Ask everybody else. What does everybody think? You want Rob to keep going?
Just put one more little
chat box if you want Rob to keep going.
Yeah, one more story.
Just go for it. Yes, they said.
All right. Well, here's why I say this, because right now I'm sitting in my podcast studio. Okay. That's where we're broadcasting from today, and it's awesome. But see, my studio used to be upstairs. And after I went to prison, and what happened, my mental breakdown was a result of arson and a mental blackout, and it was horrible. It was awful, and we lost everything along the way. And in that, I had to press into God and say, God, and my wife, we had to press into him, because that's all we had. It was like things were way, way, way out of control. And so we did, and God showed up, and so many cool things happened along the way. But see, we put a request out of, we needed a place to live. My mother-in-law lives here, and she's amazing. Carolyn and Hank are amazing. They let us live there for a while, but it was time to go. And we find this place. And so now in the basement where I am right now, it's a full 1,600 square foot apartment. We lived here for 3 years, right? And we're just trusting God to redeem our story. Really are. Because I mean, it was a heartache for my family, my wife, my neighbors. Like, it was awful. Nobody got hurt, thank goodness, but it was a journey. And so down here, we lived in this basement for 3 years, and our landlord gave us this offer, and she goes, God kept me up for 1 week, and God said, I need to give you an opportunity to buy this house. So for 5 years, we lived upstairs, because she moved to another state because she got sick, and lived with her family. But we lived here for 5 years, and we rented our basement out for 5 years to other people. And in that journey, we're excited. Like, it's coming to that climax moment of like, here we go. We're getting ready to buy the house. And then boom, the landlord would not sell us the house because the market in Colorado went up and went crazy. And you talk about like taking the steam out of you. It's just like, oh my goodness, really? God, how could you bring us this far and drop us now? And I was like, he's not dropping us. I don't care what the details are, what the attorneys say, all that stuff. So we spent a whole year in a lawsuit to buy this house that we're in now. And we won. God found favor for us, and we won. And we're in this huge asset that we live in now, right? And in the journey of that, it was the decision to say, we're not going to rent our basement out. We are going to invest in our kids and our community. So we've turned this house more into like a ministry house, right? And now I get to sit in the basement where the whole thing started, in the room where this whole thing started, when my wife and I slept, and it's now the studio I get to use to broadcast and share stories and podcasting with people. And I look at that as just another black bear story, that God cared enough, but I did not lose sight on the blessing he had in front of us. I'm like, I refuse to believe that we're going to lose this asset in this house, God. And now we get to live here in peace, and he delivered in a way that we never would have expected. And I did not like the outcome, and from a financial perspective, from what we spent on attorneys, but we're going to believe God replaces all that. And just know that this house right now where we live in Denver, Colorado. So if anyone's listening and you're coming to Littleton, Colorado, and you're a Facebook person, whatever, shoot me a message. We'll go grab coffee somewhere. And if I feel led enough, we'll hang out in my studio here and do a little interview. So Johnny, Linda, if y'all are ever in Colorado, you come down here. We're going to sit in my studio. We're going to share your story live. Mary, just like, this is the place that we're going to reach people for Jesus right here. And I'm just grateful to have met you and to do this and just to have fun down here. And I love to just take my camera around. I'll say, like, it looks really nice back here, doesn't it? Like this background. And this is a green screen right here. But
I love it.
But you take the green screen, and we got to do this real quick, right? We're going to go like this. Like, yeah, but see, there's the window. There's my bike and my little library back there. And there's the new interview table. But yeah, I mean, this is like, it's all fancy and schmancy, but anyway, that's it. I just want to share that too, that, let's go Colorado. I love it. And I just love helping people break free from addictions. But what I really love is helping families find their identity in Jesus Christ. And if they're willing to listen, I'd love to share it.
Oh, that's wonderful, Rob. Thank you. Going to see if I can figure out how to get me back in here. I don't know what I did.
I see you in the middle right now of the screen.
Yeah, I think that's the wrong one. Yeah, that's the wrong one.